put it like this. Here's our first kind of a follow-up lesson about this. Most conflict in the church deals with temporal things, issues that won't matter in eternity. In our story, the people that are involved realize that the only thing that's important is that which will matter in eternity. And what will matter in eternity is the souls of the people that we come in contact with. That's why he left us here. We want to tell them the story of Jesus. And that's what's happening here in Acts chapter 15 and verse 35. We read about this morning. So all of this conflict is happening. They finally resolve it. Remember, they send out letters. Paul takes those letters to the people. In verse 35, but Paul and Barnabas remained in Antioch, where they and many others taught and preached the word of the Lord. That's the stuff that will matter in eternity. And so whenever you're in a conflict, a disagreement, you have to ask yourself, wait, is this really going to have any impact in eternity? Temporal, eternal. We've talked about this before, some of the things that churches end up getting in fights about, which version of the Bible to use. That's something that you can have a discussion about. There's some people that really like the King James Version. Other people will swear by the New American Standard. I happen to use the NIV, 1984 version, and the story and the saga goes on and on. You can have a discussion about it, but it is something that isn't going to matter in eternity which version of the Bible that you used. How about the other one? Contemporary music versus traditional. I love pipe organ. If this church had more money, as soon as we got the windows done, right here. You know, nice rack of pipes there, and we take the ceiling out a little bit, putting in the 32-footers.
Can't do that.
Oh man, these windows would rock.
The ceiling would be outside.
Well, no, there's some room above there, a little bit. But we can't do it till after we get the lead fixed. Yeah. This debate has been raging for a long time. The answer for that isn't going to matter in eternity, so you have to be careful. What else do we fight about? Oh, color of carpet. I can't believe how passionate people get about that. We've had 2 remodels since I've been here, and both times you can almost feel it beneath the surface. People talking about, well, what color are we going to pick? Remember how we solved it? Each time, we literally put a board up in the back and we took a vote. And we were still nervous. How's it going to go? What's going to happen? Temporal issues. Now, there are some things, if you want to get into a church division about, there are some worth fighting about. If somebody decides and starts to spread a rumor, I've been thinking about it. Let's just say me, for example. Say I get up here one Sunday night and I go, listen, guys, been really reading the Word. And in the midst of doing it, I had a vision. And in the vision, it could happen. Quiet. In the vision, I was told that Jesus is no longer the only way to heaven, that there are many paths to God. And you'd be sitting here going, what? And so then all of a sudden I start trying to get people on my side. Hey, Dave, what do you think? I think there's a lot of paths. I think we've been a little too close-minded on here. That is the time for a church split, and Lance has got to go, right? If it's something doctrinal. But the problem with that is people take doctrinal fact. The doctrinal fact is Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. If false doctrine is a part of the discussion, yes, then you have to have some division. You have to split on that. But there are a lot of things in the Scripture that people want to take a stand on. And we kind of talked about this when we were in Acts chapter 14. Remember, we had this whole theological discussion between the people that hold to the Calvinistic kind of thinking and those that hold to the Arminian. We've talked about it when it comes to the rapture. There are some that are pre-trib, some that are mid-trib, some that are post-trib. Those are doctrinal issues that you don't split the church over because God didn't give you enough information on it. There's no reason why in any congregation there can be a pre-trib guy and a mid-trib guy and a post-trib guy, because eventually you're going to find out who's right. Right? Right? I've said this for a long time. If you're a post-trib guy and the trumpets, and I'm a pre-trib guy, so the trumpet sounds, the voice of the archangel shouts, I'm out of here. Let me tell you something. The post-trib guy doesn't get left behind. He goes too, right? And if I'm wrong and the tribulation period starts, okay, kudos to the post-trib guy. But none of those are issues worth dividing or splitting a church over, because Acts chapter 15 and verse 35 tells us what is the issue: teaching and preaching the word of the Lord. That is what has to drive us in the things that we do. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. So that kind of leads us full circle to the church that I grew up in. I went to a church very similar to this, about the same amount of people. We had a very active youth group. Our pastor had graduated from Moody, and his first church was ours. So he would have probably been in his early 20s, maybe 23, 24. And we had a church elder that was very vocal and passionate. And when he believed in something, he taught it with such power that everybody was afraid. Because if he said it, his name was Paul. I won't tell you his last name just in case he's in heaven. Huh? So he found this verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Let's read it. I quoted it for you last week, but here it is. Does not the very nature of things teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace to him? I grew up in the 70s, obviously, so this would have been about 1972, somewhere around there. And most guys had longer hair. So he finds this verse, and he decided that that verse applied to all of the guys, and his version of it was the haircut was a regular haircut, and your hair could not touch the top of your ear. That was his decision. Now I'm just in high school. I'm like, he's showing me his verse. I'm like, but does it really say that? I mean, like, who's to decide how long is long? But he was very passionate in it. And so he kept pushing it, and this young pastor was almost afraid to say something to him because he was so passionate about it. My friends, it doesn't matter how passionate you are about something. If the agenda that you're pushing takes away from the mission that God gave you, somebody's got to stand back and go, we got to be careful here. And so they told me I had to get my hair cut. And at this time, too, we had a youth group, I don't know, probably 30 to 40 kids. Every Saturday night it was happening. Kids were getting saved. This young pastor had another guy from church that they work with, and they were a wonderful team. I loved coming to youth group. But this elder thought that this verse not only applied to the church kids, but every kid. So he wanted to come out to youth group, and if any of the kids had long hair, they couldn't come to church. Now you're thinking, well, how long is long, Pastor? I mean, I don't have any hair now. What was it like back then? Did you have it long and flowing down here? Did you ever have the long hair, Steve? Did you miss that? A little bit. So anyway, I was looking through and I found my high school picture that this is the picture of me when all this debate raged on. Look at that guy.
Whoa, look at those waves.
Full head of hair. I might be able to do that again. It would be slight comb over going on all the way, but I might be able to do it. You know, I look at that now and I think, you know, that hair wasn't very long. But his obsession and that picture, he kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. I didn't want to get it cut, and so I literally got called into the board, and they told me that I couldn't come to church anymore. And I can't remember, you know, as time goes on, I don't remember much stuff about, grade school and high school, only moments that really gripped you. I still remember that first Sunday sitting at home, and I loved my church. I loved working there. I just loved everything about it. And I remember sitting at home just devastated that I couldn't go to church. So I don't remember now if it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but somewhere along the line I knuckled under the pressure and I got a haircut because I loved my church. But I wish somebody would have stood up and said, this is crazy that we're splitting the church about this, which leads me back to what I was trying to tell you about this morning, that there's always a group A, there's always a group B, and there's always a group C. So in my church, group A was the adult leadership. It was a small board. I think there was the pastor, this elder, and maybe 2 other guys on the board. And this, I told you, this wasn't the only rule. Not only did I have to cut my hair, I also had to wear a suit and tie. Maybe that's why today I rebel. So it affected the church kids. Now, I'm very fortunate. My mom was a stable factor in my life, and so I got my hair cut. I kept going to church. But Group C, that entire youth group that we had, they dismantled the whole thing. No kids would come because, nobody was going to get their hair cut. Nobody was going to dress the way that they wanted to. There was a young man in there that I was good friends with. His name was Rick. And just before this all started, Rick and I were having a great time at youth group. This same pastor that we loved, he suggested that we spend our summer at a camp out in Massachusetts. And so him and I went out there. We had a wonderful time working as camp counselors. Then when we came back from camp, this situation at church was just raging. And so Rick had more flowing locks than I did, and he wasn't getting his hair cut. And so he quit coming to church, and he never returned to the things of Jesus Christ. Visitors that came in, they literally had an usher at the back, so it would be either one of our gyms. And if somebody came in, they would welcome them, and they would say, say Martin came in tonight, and Jim would say, Martin, thank you for being here with us. You're a first-time visitor. Just want you to know, Martin, if you come back next week, you have to have a suit and tie on. Didn't matter, Christian, non-Christian. They literally told people they couldn't come back. And then my high school, I had this pastor, and then my high school leader, his name was Wayne, and he was just so wonderful. He got discouraged by all this. He quit the church, and it took him years to try to come back, and then he spiraled out of control, ended up getting a divorce from his wife, and it was just horrible. All because somewhere along the line, people lost sight of Acts chapter 15 and verse 35, concentrating on things that are eternal rather than things that are temporal. So be very careful when these things come up in a discussion, in an argument, that you don't get sidetracked by it. Now, what does that mean? It means sometimes in the midst of these discussions, your thinking, your view, your opinion may not win. I got a story for you. So, as you know, my mentor is Pastor Chip Chase. And when I was in Chicago working as a police officer, I was on the board at Cicero Bible Church. And Pastor Chip Chase, as you well know, is very popular. He would travel a lot and be speaking. And at one point, our church was a member of an organization called the IFCA. It's the Independent Fundamental Churches of America. And they have an election each year where they elect from all of the membership one to be the president. And that means he has to go for 2 weeks in the summertime when they have their outreaches. He's asked to travel. And so Pastor Chip Chase gets asked to be the president of the IFCA. So he comes into the board and he's asking for permission to do this because it means he's going to do a lot more traveling. And I'm sitting there, you got to be kidding me. You're traveling a lot anyway. So the discussion gets going, and I'm very firm in my thinking that there's no way he should accept this job. The rest of the board didn't agree with me. And so the vote came up, and I don't remember how many was on the board. Let's say there were 12 guys on the board. The vote was 11-1. Now, you know what? I didn't get my way. Sometimes when that happens, people think they're going to leave. Listen, whether he was on the IFCA, yes or no, that's something that's not going to really affect the here and now. It's a temporal decision. It's not something that impacts eternity. I just moved on. It was a valuable lesson for me because sometimes in these discussions, you can have an opinion on it, but you might not always get your way. I did not vote for this carpet. Did you? You did? See, well, Steve always gets his way, but not me. I wanted something with a little bit more blue in it. But I didn't win. It doesn't mean I resigned the next week. Why are you leaving, Pastor? I wanted the carpet with the blue speckles in it. No. These discussions are a part of church life. They just happen. But you have to reach a place where you realize in the midst of those things that occur in everyday life in the church, there is something far more important, and that's the mission that he gave us. When you understand that, sometimes you're going to get your way, sometimes you don't. You know, I may not like this carpet, but I like the pews. Right? It's just life. And so don't get sidetracked by those. Make sure that you move on from them.